Hello, I'm Pylon John, and welcome back to the city of Haddaway here in Cities Skylines 2. Between episodes, I finally grade separated the main road from the railroad, although I had to move the motel, gas station, and food station out of the way to do it. At some point, I may need to also build a second road going into town. I also made a few changes off camera to our business park. For example, I added the vehicle factory signature building up here. That gives us +2 industrial efficiency citywide. And I added some stone mining down over here. And I doubled up this rail line. I figure it might eventually get some pretty heavy use, even though that wouldn't really be very realistic for Southern Ontario. And taking a look at our unemployment rate, it's come down from the ridiculous levels it was at in the last episode, but it's still way too high. But our first priority, finally adding some decals to this build. We can use them to grunge up this industrial area a little bit. But it's easy to get carried away with the decals. Oh, another fire. Let's just nip this one in the bud. We'll have to stay vigilant from now on though. And maybe introduce some measures to prevent the spread of wildfires, considering that Haddaway is especially prone to them and that a fire destroyed the entire city in episode 4. I'm thinking of adding some more waterways. Maybe a river right about here. I'll start digging in these valleys, where the ground is already a little lower and there are already some bridges in place. We can add a few branches and try to make it look at least as realistic as the river next to it. I'll try to have it slope down gradually from the hills. And then I'll smooth out the edges a little bit. This is actually my first time trying out Yin Yang's water features mod. Let's see how this works. And let's use dev mode to increase the water simulation speed so we don't have to wait all day. It's down here. We can bring it all the way up to the maximum speed. No, my computer can't quite handle that. We'll bring it back down a little. And see that we've got some flooding down here. We'll have to make a few adjustments. Another fire prevention measure we can introduce is to replace the forest between rows of housing with alleyways. This will also contribute to urbanizing and densifying this area. And based on what I've seen in Google Maps, I think I'll add one more waterway. This will be a ditch for either irrigation or drainage for the farms up here. Probably drainage. And now it looks like both of our apple orchards are on fire. And so we'll go back into emergency response mode again. The first thing we've got to do is rebuild our... Nope, wrong tab. There we go. Rebuild our firefighter helicopter depot, even though we can't really afford it. And they'll quickly take care of this fire. Okay, maybe not that quickly. And there's still that other fire over there. While we try to save up enough money to expand the city and build new roads, let's try to do something about this traffic. It's particularly bad at this intersection. With cars trying to turn left into the business park. So just for this purpose, I'll add the traffic lights enhancement mod and try split phasing. I'll also use Road Builder to try to come up with some combination of lanes that helps reduce traffic but doesn't look too janky. Does that work? I don't think that works. Let's go back to the drawing board. And use another mod, Traffic, to help us get cars going into the desired lanes. We can also add a slip lane here for right turns. And use the lane connector tool to make sure that people actually use it instead of turning right here. With our wildfire and traffic problems under control for now, let's turn to the main focus of this episode, which is the incredible variety of buildings we now have available thanks to all the region packs. So we'll go through the whole city and completely redevelop entire districts. But we'll start with the elementary school. Let's get rid of the original one and replace it with the USA Southwest Elementary School. And as students flee the demolition of their old school, we'll make sure the new one is nice and centered here. And maybe get this spruce tree out of the way. If the terrain was looking a little weird, it's because I forgot to reset my settings in the map texture replacer. Let's add the arts and music building upgrade, which seems to be a big hit with the neighbors, and the extra classrooms, which do not. The placement of the parking lot on the back right of this school makes it feel like it should be up against the road, like this. This is, of course, the Glengarry Elementary School. And it doesn't come with a playground, but it definitely needs a playground. In fact, 2 would fit perfectly here. I also decided to go with the Southwest High School. The Southwest assets are just the ones that look the most appropriate for small town or suburban areas. But it is a beast, so I'll have to delete some things to make way for it. I think this was one of the first custom parking lots I ever made. There we go. We'll need to replace this fence though. And I'm gonna try placing the park maintenance depot in this corner, even though overlapping service buildings can cause some props to disappear. Since I can't recolor a net lane fence to match the bricks of the school building, I'll recolor the bricks of the school building to match the fence. The next service building on our list, and the one the residents have been clamoring for, is a post office. And even though it's certainly not the most cost-effective option, the one that would look best here is the Eastern European post office. But to make it happen, we'll have to delete this alleyway that we just added. And I just love the dirt and wear on this building. I bet it was built in the 60s or 70s and has been a hub of the community ever since. It's just, is that Russian over the entrance? Unfortunately, residents of this town would not have liked that, especially if it was built during the Cold War. But thankfully, we have the perfect decal to cover that up. Now we can just place a few mailboxes to ensure maximum service coverage, and color them red for communism, or Canada Post. And now we'll turn Glengarry Road into a proper stroad, with large stores and even larger parking lots that take advantage of all the space between the sidewalk and the back alley. There are a few vanilla assets we can use for this, but the new region packs are going to help a lot. So we'll start by clearing these out. Some of the new assets gave me the idea to create a large billboard for the motel visible from the highway. I'll place 2 of them back to back with a light pole in the middle and raise them up using Move It. I think it looks great at night. Like I said, there are some vanilla assets that do okay here. But I don't think this would be possible without, especially the Southwest pack. It's got lots of buildings that look like big box stores and supermarkets, and fast food chains, even though you never know what kind of business will actually occupy it. The Japan region pack has a few good buildings for this too. I think I'm actually going to replace this motel with a new one from the Southwest pack. It just looks way more realistic. And I can make the grass along the road look way more realistic with surfaces and decals. And of course a few plants here and there. Like I said, I want to make full use of all the space between the sidewalk and the alley. So we can drag these surfaces all the way back. The intersection of Campbell Boulevard and Glengarry Road is going to be a pretty busy one, so we're going to be very selective about which buildings we place here. This one would likely look better elsewhere. I think I want to place one of these big supermarket looking buildings here. There's so many new assets and they all look great, but some of them come with a few glitches, like signposts that disappear or floating rocks. I'll come in with some more decals and surfaces to make the gap between these buildings into a special place. And add a little footpath through here. This needs to be dirtied up a little bit. There, that's better. The old fast food joint wedged in here would have some grime on it. And if the grime is a little too much, we can just sink it into the ground partially. The transform tool will give us even more fine-grained control over its placement, including its angle. The art supply store signature building might fit nicely in here. Next to the beloved old post office. But it looks way cooler from this side. So here's what the road into town looks like now. Unfortunately, commercial demand is still an issue, so most of these storefronts remain vacant for now. More wildfires, but because of the rivers, we don't have to worry about them as much. And using the position of the sun, I've determined that the directions I've been treating as north and south are actually west and east. But no big deal, we can just do like Montreal and pretend. Next, I want to get to work on the Memorial Park district, starting with these row homes across from the high school. They're not bad, but I want to see what we can do with all the new assets we now have. And one of these days, a tornado might actually cause some damage. Maybe. Here, the US Northeast Pack will come in handy. I think this looks pretty good, but this still needs some work. And by work, I mean demolition. These southwest medium-density residential buildings look like the kind of condo towers that have been popping up in every available space in every city for the last 20 years. This one's perfect. We just gotta get rid of these palm trees. And change the colors from southwest to northeast. This row of identical little apartment buildings provides a line of continuity as the buildings around it gradually increase in height. And I'd like to keep them. But this land right across from the park would be too valuable not to redevelop. I'll go with a couple of these southwest buildings side by side and replace this custom parking lot next to the radio mast with this one. And we have another fire. You know what that means. Reactivate the firefighting helicopter depot and jack up the budget. No, actually, I think I can take care of this one myself. I'll just contain the fire by deleting all the trees around it, and we should be good. But it is fun to see the helicopters coming, and the fires put themselves out in anticipation. Another visual modification, this time using the road wear adjuster. And these settings are based on a recommendation by City Planner Plays. In order to basically switch which parts of the road are light and which dark, and I think this looks better. Back on Macmillan Street, I also think we can improve on these three identical towers here. These are also right next to the park. But if you're going to demolish these buildings, you have to remember to either pause the game or de-zone the area, otherwise buildings will just spawn right back in. I actually think these UK medium density flats look great, but I feel like the buildings we place here should have parking garages. So we'll have to replace them with something else. These North American buildings, with some recoloring and a few excess props removed, will look fine, I guess. I'll just add a couple more buildings to the end of this street before moving on to these low rent buildings over here, which are just way too massive for this spot. And I'll simply replace them with these slightly smaller low rent buildings. Nothing special. We can place another of the southwest medium density residential buildings over here. And of course, delete the palm trees. And I'm not sure how the heck this happened. It looks like the driver of this gray van is just as confused as I am. Yes, I see the fires. Don't worry about it. Let's focus on replacing these buildings on Fraser Boulevard. Here I'll splice together a couple of the US Northeast medium-density residential buildings. These ones come with parking garages. Okay, that's enough for Memorial Park. Let's move on to the College District. The first thing we have to do is place a college, which will set the tone for the rest of the district. And I'm going with the Chinese Community College. Even though we can't really afford it right now, so we'll just deactivate it. Now I wanted to kind of blend in aesthetically with the park across the street, so we'll use the same gray tile surface. The area bucket tool makes using surfaces so much easier. And I've decided to completely redo the road network in this district to really give it the feel of one cohesive and distinct neighborhood. Yeah, something like this. We'd better make sure these southwest medium-density residential buildings have loads of parking. I'll place some more of them right behind the college, as well as this Chinese elementary school. It fits perfectly in this spot. And I tried using walls to cover up the Chinese characters, but I couldn't get it to look very good. So the locals will just have to learn Chinese. More of these southwest medium-density residential buildings. I just can't stand the sight of those big blank walls, so what I'll do is merge a couple of them together like this. And add one more to complete this half of the development. Over on this side of the college, I'll take a look at some of these beautiful Chinese medium-density residential buildings. And end up going with these French low-rent buildings. We'll just nudge this one over. So again, it looks like one building. Don't like the color of this roof? Decals to the rescue once again. We'll finally get to place these UK buildings over here. Plenty of space for parking this time. Toward the back of the college district, we'll work our way down to some row houses and some very modern and luxurious single-family homes. Basketball court and tennis courts too. This appears to be the most desirable commercial area in the city so far. So I made this relatively walkable by splicing together a combination of mixed-use buildings from the northeast and southwest packs, along with some high-density commercial and low-density office buildings. I think the new college district looks great in the fall. I recolored all the buildings I could to match the college's white and orange color scheme, while other buildings have brick accents which better match the rest of the city. And with the college district complete, I think it's time to finally redevelop Glengarry Village. Instead of just plopping buildings, I'll try to let zoning do some of the work for me here. And I'll start by simply replacing houses that don't look like they fit with either Southwest or UK low-density housing. And in case you're still keeping track of milestones, we just hit milestone 12, large city. Wherever houses pop up that I don't love, I'll just replace them with houses that I do. The streets perpendicular to Glengarry Road, like Charlotte Street, are meant to provide more of a small-town shopping experience, with low-density commercial buildings and lots of walkability. So I want to get rid of these buildings with the parking in front. Sure, we can use some of the original North American and European low-density commercial buildings. We'll just squeeze these two in together to make them fit. And use better bulldozer to get rid of what we don't need. But over here, along Campbell Boulevard, I'll go with some southwest buildings. And in the gaps, I'll squeeze in some of these pocket parks. I haven't really taken advantage of these yet. Let's mix in some of these northeastern row houses. And again, to fill in the entire space between the street and the alley behind it, I'm going with buildings that are mostly 4 or 5 units deep. Then around back, I'll trim off their fences. Extend any existing grass surfaces all the way back to the alley. And then add in my own fences. I mostly make use of this wooden fence, but try to mix it up a bit for variety. Sometimes I get carried away making sure that everything is just right. But only sometimes. And it just wouldn't look finished without a few more trees. And here's what our finished alleys look like now. I think I'm happy with that. How about a quick bird's eye view of the new, improved, and slightly less flammable Glengarry Village? There's just one last thing I have to do. No, I'm not talking about fixing traffic. I'm talking about getting rid of roadside parking along Glengarry Road. A real-life Strode wouldn't have roadside parking like this. All the buildings along it already have loads of parking, and it's meant to carry large volumes of traffic at high speeds. We'll just bring the width of the sidewalk back down to its usual 3.5 meters. And then do the same on the other side. The road will keep its original width if we add a median and make it 5 meters wide. Then we'll convert the whole urbanized stretch of Glengarry Road to our new road type. And maybe this stretch of Campbell Boulevard too. I'll end up placing grass on this median. Can you spot any of the floating signage I mentioned earlier? Everybody coming into town seems to want to turn left here. We'll have to do something about that. But maybe in the next episode. That'll be all for this one. As always, thank you very much for watching. And if you've made it all the way to the end, why not drop a like or a comment? And consider subscribing for more. I'm Pylon John. Until next time, Free Palestine.